Alright, so I'm going to go over really quick how to make threading for stuff like screws or water bottles or whatever. In this case, you'll probably need it for your pens if you're taking my CGI class. But what you're going to want to do is start out with a Polygon primitive Helix. So under the Create menu, Polygon primitive, Helix, drag the little booger out on your grid, and then, just set the specs to be, whatever makes sense for your application. I'm just doing something random. So you have these, then you can, of course, in your channel box, you can go into the PolyHelix 1 and modify any of these settings as needed. In this case, maybe I don't need, 8 subdivisions on the axis, like maybe I only want 6. I usually set the subdivisions coil down much lower because 50 is honestly just excessive in my opinion. The one thing you do usually want to make sure of, if possible, I like to leave this as a multiple of 10. And you'll see why in a minute, but basically what I'm looking for is if you're looking at sort of a top-down view of this, where you're sort of looking like the lines or the edge loops line up where they are, it'll make it like a little bit easier. It seems like sort of multiples of 5, or I don't know. What did I do earlier that like didn't work for this? But anyway, either way, not the end of the world. Choose something that makes sense for your project. If you're stitching this into an existing mesh, pick whatever number that is. So this is going to be the base for your screws, so again, make sure it matches up whatever reference you're using. And what we're going to do is just go through and delete, like if you click on one of these loops, double click, it's going to highlight the loops running around the entire helix because of the way the model is set up. And we're just going to go ahead and delete that. So basically we're only interested in the edge loops that are basically on the outside of this threading. So again, I just deleted the other edge loop on the bottom, and you should be able to double-click this sort of inner ring of loops, and it's going to select those all the way down. That's completely separated at this point from the mesh. You should just be good to double-click one face, it'll select all of them, and just delete all of them. And at this point, you basically have this like weird sort of, unfinished helix left over. So we need a way, basically, the first thing to do is like connect these edges. So what we're going to do is go into the mesh tools, and you could do this with the bridge tool as well. I just like append polygon for the first ones. So I'm going to go mesh tools, append polygon, put this edge, and attach it to the one right below it. And this is just, again, where it's a little bit easier if these are sort of lined up to each other instead of like super crazy skewed. But it doesn't really matter all that much. So you want to do the same thing on the bottom. Just connect those two loops there. And I just hit G on the keyboard to repeat the last command, in this case the append to polygon tool. Now we could go through if we really wanted to and append all of these manually, but that honestly sounds like a terrible way to spend your time. So what we're going to do is this time actually use the bridge tool. So just double click on one of these loops, and you'll notice that it's gone through and selected pretty much the entire loop on the inside of this. So you just want to deselect the little vertical edges here and up here. And then you'll have basically two little sort of rings of edge loops, one for the top and one for the bottom of the threads. Then you should be good to edit mesh and bridge those. And once you do that, hopefully you should have something that looks kind of like this. Lovely, weird threading. So this is not finished, but it does pretty much look like threading at this point, which is, I guess, pretty exciting. We need a way to kind of finish off this end so it's not just like weirdly terminated. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. A lot of this depends on, how many loops and such that you put into your threading. So I'll just sort of work off this model. I'll show you this again, but again, there's sort of different ways to do this. So usually what I do is I'll sort of grab this upper loop here, or just like grab the whole top loop, like this. You can see it's grabbed the entire top, this weird little up and down line here. And I'm just going to deselect these vertical lines. I only want the horizontal ones. And what I'm going to do is just do an extrude. I'm using the hotkey Control-E for that. There's a button for it right here, and you can just do Edit Mesh. Extrude is somewhere in that menu. Honestly, I haven't used the menu in a very long time. And it seems like my thing... Okay, we're not. I was going to say my selecting button is being insane, but apparently it wasn't. So I'm just going to move these straight up like this, and then just scale them down so that they end up being flat. One thing you'll notice about this, and I always forget to do this, is that these vertices here are not actually connected to each other, so There's two things you can do. One is just grab both vertices and do a merge to center. I use the little pizza icon up here. The other thing that you can do, which is kind of cool for like bulk edits, is if you select your object or a chunk of vertices on your object, you can do edit mesh and merge, and that will merge anything that is closer than the distance specified here. So what we do, it should, if you don't enter 0, it should go through and actually merge those vertices automatically for you. And you can see that it's actually gone through and done that. So that bit's done. Now we just need a way to sort of close off this horrendous looking little end cap here. And you'll also notice, like, if we smooth this, smoothing your mesh with the 3 key is a great way to find weird errors and things. In this case, like, this is clearly not connected. The 3 key shows that much more clearly than the unsmooth model. So this is the part that gets a little janky. You just kind of wing it based on whatever you're doing. So what I usually do is go through and I'm just going to append this cap together. And again, I'm pretty much just winging this entire thing, and it looks like I'm going to probably end up just throwing a try in the end of this. So this is still slightly less broken, but it's still not super great. Again, if you click on this edge, where's why? What? Question mark? Why is my cursor thing all the way down there? Alright, it's weird. Alright, so if we grab the face, the edge selection has gone nuts. You can see again that's still a giant open hole, so we need a way to close that. Usually what I do is I'll just go into my multi-cut tool. There's a little hotkey for it up here. I think there's also its Mesh Tools multi-cut. Or the hotkey Control-Shift-V, which is usually what I do. So just grab from the little vertice up here, down somewhere kind of close to that other bottom one. And you can see that it's gone through and it's added that line manually. So we smooth this, you can see still very clearly not attached, but what we can do is just go and grab these guys and do a merge to center, and that sort of starts connecting things together. In this case, it looks way more broken than it is when we smooth it. The one thing that's causing this to be weird is, like, we've connected these vertices down here, this one still not connected. I find the easiest way, honestly, to connect that is to just delete this face and do a Mesh Tools append to Polygon here. That way, when we smooth it, we have something that does actually resemble threading. And the last thing that I usually do on this is sort of smoothing it. Like, this is a really disgusting, aggressive sort of loop here. So what I usually do is just kind of cheat and do an edit mesh average. And that'll kind of crush it back down into the rest of the model. It's just kind of like, you can do it manually. There's nothing wrong with doing it manually. I'm obviously just super lazy. And I'm just, again, hitting G to repeat that command. Do be aware, though, this tool will remove a lot of... Don't crash, don't crash, don't crash. It'll remove a lot of volume from your model. So do, again, just sort of be aware of that. Alright, mine died, so let's do this one more time just for grins. I was going to redo this anyway. So start with a Polygon primitive Helix. Drag your Helix to whatever specs that you require. Or, sure, that makes sense. And I'm just going to set this to like 20. Alright, so first thing you want to do. The other thing, I don't know if I mentioned this before, one thing I usually look for is sort of a band of loops running directly around the center of this. It just provides a convenient place to sort of chop half of the helix off, basically. So if I use something like 6, right now you can see that there's no loop running directly through the top and bottom of this, so it's going to make life a little bit harder. Still totally workable. It's going to honestly give you pretty much the same results. I just really like having that loop running right through the center. So I usually use that. So anywho, just go through and delete those inner rings, like so. You should have something like this. Go through to Mesh Tools, Append Polygon, or again, you can use the Bridge tool for this. Hooray. And hooray. And then you want to go through and... Bridge tool. That, I was like, what's the tool called? Oh my god! So just, again, double-click this, deselect little end caps, and do an Edit Mesh Bridge. If you needed to, for some reason, you could add subdivisions in here. In this case, I think that's excessive. And then what you're going to need to do is cap off the top and bottom of this little monstrosity. So grab the whole top loop and then just deselect these sort of vertical bits here and do an extrude, drag that up, and smush it down so it's flat. Again, don't forget that you do need to merge these vertices, which I will do. Which I will do with the Merge to Center tool, making sure to not select vertices in the back of your model. And then basically just close off this in whatever way makes sense. Again, it's really hard to sort of, like, go through every scenario of threading. In this case, I'm just going to kind of pen them close and call that a day. And there's one more alternative way you can use to sort of close this instead of using the multi-cut tool. Nix that entire face there, and just append Polygon this whole thing closed. Which honestly is probably way easier than whatever the heck I did before. And now, again, you pretty much have threads. So what you should do is, again, it's usually good to go in to edit mesh and average these vertices a little bit. Or again, you could just sort of grab these and manually squish them in. Whatever, makes sense or is easy for your model. That's basically threads. I'm going to do that one more time on the bottom, just for grins. It'll go faster this time. So again, grab all these faces, deselect any of them that are vertical, and extrude, push them down, squish them flat, and actually, you know what, I don't even need this whole thing here right now. What the heck, let's just get rid of it. Go to Mesh Tools and just start appending this whole thing shut. One thing I do like to make sure is, whatever pattern you do on the bottom, or like on the first side you close off here, do that on the top. So like what I wouldn't want to do is go through and do something weird like this, where I basically like swapped out which faces when penning. There's a different pattern on the bottom. That's not what you want. It'll just make it's gonna make your edge loops harder to control, which is always something to avoid if possible. So basically just seal all that shut, and then just go through and append these back. And now we have threads on the top and bottom of this screw. And one of the benefits of setting things up in the way that I have done here, I'm going to shamelessly ignore the fact that I haven't modified that end at all, is the edge flow makes it relatively easy to harden this if you need to harden this. So what we can do, if necessary, is go through and do an insert edge loop tool, and you'll see it does a pretty nice job running loops from the top and bottom of this model. And it's going to like harden those edges out really nicely. Sometimes it does, for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, honestly. This is well within the parameters of how the tool should function. But sometimes it misses loops. And if that happens, you can just kind of go through and add in another loop. You can see it's connected them here. So what we're going to do is just, and this is where stuff like tends to get a little bit weird sometimes, is just get rid of that. So we have an n-gon up here, like make sure that you watch out for n-gons. But then we can go in with the multi-cut tool, and again, I'm using the hotkey for this, there's a button for it right here. Multi-cut that together, so now that's connected. And then again, giant n-gon here and n-gon here. If you're ever worried, I will totally take points off stuff for n-gons here, my students. There is a way to basically search for n-gons if you go into Mesh and Cleanup. You can do select matching polygons here, apply to, I usually do selected objects. All polygonal objects, if you have a lot of stuff in your scene, will kind of blow stuff up aggressively, so I kind of avoid that where possible. And then do faces with more than 4 sides. And if you hit apply on that, it should go through on any object you have selected and basically select or highlight anything that's an n-gon. Anything with more than 4 sides, it's going to grab. And that's pretty much the definition of an n-gon. So it's pretty handy. So in this case, it's shown us where they are. We can just go through, and I'm just going to kind of multi-cut these closed in a, honestly, somewhat arbitrary fashion. There's a whole host of different ways to do this, all of which, in my opinion, are kind of gross. But if we run this again, you'll notice that it's not flagging any n-gons in the area we were just working on. So then we'd be free to go and sort of... Oh, Maya. So I don't know why my computer keeps doing this, but it keeps... You'll notice like if I hover on this, it's like, keeps telling slide. Every once in a while, if you go into your tool settings, it for some reason puts this transform constraint on for like edge, just set it to off. But anywho, so we should be good at this point to sort of build out whatever the rest of our object is. And if we smooth this, it actually looks pretty reasonable. Now a lot of people might look at this and be like, oh god, there's tries. I'm kind of the opinion that I don't mind tries as long as they're not causing like weird, horrendous smoothing issues on your mesh. So again, as long as there's not like weird zits from the tries, kind of who cares? There's a little bit of one like right in here, which isn't super ideal. But this is also kind of, in my opinion, somewhere that's unlikely to be seen a lot. You could try reducing sort of like eliminating the try by just doing a merge to center. And then this is actually making more tries, but the way that they're laid out isn't really going to affect the mesh in such a way. So in this case, adding more tries actually fixed the issue, which is a little bit weird. It does make the edge flow slightly less nice. Previously, I could have gone through... Actually, let me just undo this. Okay, so before I did that, I could have gone through if I wanted to and done an edge loop, and it would have wrapped around the entire... this entire sort of little loop thing here. And it would have applied an edge loop to the top and bottom of my threads. If I smooth that, it would give me a really nice, like really hard edge. So if I was going to do that, I'd probably do that before I merge this to center. Because in that case, it's going to go and sort of, you still have that loop if you need to add that in. So it doesn't really make a huge difference either way. You could draw this in manually. It's just in this case, like I knew I kind of wanted that, so I put it in and then I broke the functionality to do that. But yeah, so I mean, the topology up here honestly looks pretty gross, but it does, like when you're looking at the mesh itself, it looks pretty nice, sort of, except that's a little weird. But yeah, so hopefully that kind of makes sense. I'll see what horrors I've perpetrated on this down here, so I'm just going to do, again, a mesh tools, where am I going? Sorry, edit mesh, average vertices, crush that down a tiny bit, and I'm just honestly just going to kind of call that decent. The other thing you can do, if you needed to, if you wanted, say, pointed threads for some reason, that's a, thing on some screws, they have pointy, aggressive threads. Basically, you just want to make your helix into a triangle, and then you can go in and add those little edge loops to harden the threads, and then they become super hard and aggressive. The other thing you can do, if you need, say, the inside of this should be a little bit curved instead of straight, I'm just going to... No, don't crash again. Throw in another edge loop on the center of this, and then you can do a thing with your scaling. So if you scale to one axis, obviously it's only going to scale one axis. So if I was trying to scale these like this, it wouldn't work really well. Like you kind of have to like eyeball it to try to get them even. There's a quick hack for that, and you can actually you can click on these weird little planes, and it's going to scale basically both of the axes. Like you can see when I click on this, it highlights both the X and the Z axis, or the red and the blue. And it's only going to scale on those. You'll notice it's not scaling on the Y at all like it would if I grab this little center square. So you can use, again, these little planes here to do this. Or you can hold down Control and grab the axis you do not want to scale, and it does the exact same thing. So in this case, you can go through and kind of like crush that down a little bit. Maybe, again, you need like a tiny bit of taper in there. And this is pretty much modeling threads. Different variations on that. In this case, the smoothing has gone a little bit weird once I added this extra edge loop, so this is like one of those scenarios where I probably shouldn't have tapered this particular area, so I could, move that a little bit, then maybe go through and combine some edge loops into each other to try to reduce some of the very, very awkward pulling that's happening there, because it is not super pretty. And in this case, I've made an n-gon, so I'm just going to go in and draw that out. So again, another weird instance where kind of just winging the crap out of the topology. So again, this is really, if you're in my class, this is relevant. But I am not going to hunt you down if you have tries in your stuff. What I'm mostly looking for is aesthetically, like, do you see, weird, like this is a little bit of a weird shape here. There's some weird pulling here that's not ideal. So I'm mostly looking for weird shapes in your mesh like this. And also, is your mesh broken? So like if you handed me this as a final object for something, I would be like, no, your object needs volume. This is not great. You need to add volume to this. So yeah, I'm mostly looking for mesh errors, and is your mesh aesthetically weird? If you have tries, I don't really care. N-gons is a mesh error, so you should get rid of N-gons. So hopefully that makes sense. This is modeling threads. The other thing you can do, and this is pretty much, I'll show you how to, I don't know, this is kind of weird, but like, so you could attach this into an existing mesh if you needed to. If you had, you know, the 20 loops here, you could just do a bridge and just attach that right in. The other thing you can do is just sort of build the threads first, and then say build out like the top of a bottle, and sort of go through and add all of this into here like this, and just sort of build it after the fact. So in this case, I'm just going to say, cool, like my bottle is going to be this weird flat thing. I'll do an edit. I'll do an edit mesh bridge. That totally should be the same number of edge loops, so I don't know why mine is being the same. Alright, so sometimes mine does a weird thing where it's like, this isn't the same number of edge loops, and I'm like, it's totally the same number of edge loops, and sometimes I just sort of force it, and I will just sort of systematically append, and then go back in and just sort of narrow down and see where has the tool broken. For some reason, sometimes it's hard to find, and sometimes if you do this, it does, okay, oh yes I do, I have a fourth edge loop for some reason right there. Don't really know where that came from. I would advise that you find the reason for that and then fix it. In this case, I'm just going to pop a try in. The only reason I would say really fix that is it's going to make life a little bit harder if you need to like add an edge loop in here to harden that edge. But in this case, we do have, you know, pretty much like the top of a really weird looking wine bottle. The other thing you can do is build it out. So a lot of times, you know, you'll have threading and then reverse threading. So you could build out this and sort of go on the outside. Oof. Oof. That's pretty. So that way your threading's on the inside. In this case, I would just need to do a mesh display reverse to flip the normals of that, and then you have threading on the inside. So the other thing, I think this is like the final bit with threading. I keep being like, I'm done, and then I'm never done. So the other thing you can do with threading is sometimes you need threading that is nested. Like if you have a thread for something, unless it's just a screw, for something like a soda cap, you would have another piece of threading. So what you can do is just duplicate your original threading and extrude the entire mesh. And then just pull that out maybe like 0.1 or something, some unit that you think looks decent with your threading. Great. And then go into face select mode. And when you extrude an entire object, it'll give the whole thing thickness. So what you want to do, and it also only select the faces that you extruded. So what you can do in face select mode is shift marquee select the entire object, and it will reverse that selection. And you can delete the faces on the inside. So what you should have if you do this, and you can kind of see it here, is, actually what if I go into, sure. You can kind of see it here, you have this like object nested within the other object, and the threads follow each other pretty darn closely. So this method works really well for sort of making threading that fits perfectly into other threading. And then you'd be free to, you know, finish this inside object however you needed, and finish the outer object however you needed. So if you have, you know, pen pieces or something like that, with, you know, threading that goes from one piece to the other, this is usually how I would approach that. It's just sort of fairly straightforward and easy to do, I think. So again, you just take your whole object, duplicate it, and then with the object itself selected, you want to extrude, and then on the, usually it's local translate Z, this blue axis, or local translate Z here, you can adjust those values. The only thing you do want to be careful of is the fact that this will totally make your mesh flip itself, sometimes extremely aggressively. So it's not always like, it's a great way to do stuff. I do this all the time for thickening stuff for 3D printing and whatnot, Do be aware though, if you push it too far, it can break your mesh. You can see, like in here, these loops are just sort of pretty aggressively clipping through each other and making some insane shape. In this case, the fix for this is usually I'll just kind of go through and delete the offending edge loops. For something like a helix, that actually ends up being really easy because the edge loops just run in a very logical fashion. So if you delete them, I mean, this has punched a lot of n-gons here because I had terrible topology apparently, but it should go through and at least fix the mesh errors and the mesh clipping itself. So depending on what you need, again, you can sort of handle that different ways. That, I think, is actually the last bit of my thread stuff. So, yes. This, an unbroken version of this, is pretty much what I'm looking for if you're doing this for my class, and an assignment for the in-class exercise. Hopefully that made sense. Happy modeling.